Hey everybody, welcome to another order. Another order? I can take your order. Would you like fries with that? Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Disorderly Political, where my disorder is I actually like to read about politics, talk about politics, and have a reasonable debate. So let's see if we can't do that in the comments below. So let's start a little earlier in the week, and we'll start across the pond. Prime Minister David Cameron stepped down on Wednesday. He was originally not going to step down until October, after losing the Brexit vote. But he decided to step down early when it became obvious who was going to win and become the next Prime Minister, and that is Theresa May. She's the first woman to take the spot of Prime Minister since Margaret Thatcher. She's 59 years old, she's a Conservative MP, and she's been the Home Secretary since 2010. Now, interestingly enough, she was anti-Brexit. She campaigned against the Brexit. But going into the Prime Minister spot, she says, this is the will of the people, this is what they wanted, so I will continue to do that. She is not going to stop the Brexit process. In some ways, she would be considered liberal in our politics. She challenged stop and frisk, she fought against police corruption, and she called for an inquiry into institutional child abuse. Now, for some people, those are all good things and things they would support, but she comes with kind of a mixed bag. Because at the same time, she wants to reduce the amount of immigrants coming into England from 330,000 a year to tens of thousands a year. That's a huge decrease. And she also wants to stop the practice of bringing in foreign-born spouses or children and making it sort of a rate card depending on how much that spouse earns. And lastly, she voted against the Human Rights Act. So she's obviously been in the spot for only a few days. There's no way to really tell what kind of prime minister she's going to be just yet, but I would keep an eye on it because what she does could very well affect the entire EU. So for the moment, let's stay on the other continent and we'll talk about the attack in Nice. According to the latest reports, 84 people died and over 100 people injured when an attacker drove a truck through a crowd that had gathered for the Bastille Day parade. Now, France has declared a state of emergency and they have extended that from 2 weeks to 3 months, basically in an effort to stop future attacks like this. But these kind of attacks are very hard to prevent. These are people who are determined. They're using low-cost, high-availability weapons, like a truck. It's kind of a low-scale attack with high damage. And as the recording of this video, there hasn't been any direct connection between the attacker and any sort of terrorist group. Although ISIS has claimed responsibility, there's no proof of that yet. And for some of those people who would use this as an example of, say, we need to stop bringing in Syrian refugees, we need to stop taking in Muslims, we need to stop taking in foreigners, this attacker, just like the attackers in Paris in the Charlie Hebdo attack, these were all non-foreigners. In the Charlie Hebdo attack, they were French and Belgian-born citizens. This one, in the Nice attack, was a French-born citizen. So stopping immigration actually would do nothing about these attacks. These are homegrown, which is a whole different basket of problems to look into. And then moving out of France into Turkey, just over the last couple days, there was an attempted military coup to take over the country. Now, the democratically elected president was actually out of the country when this happened, vacationing. This is him. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. But as he made his way back, he tried to make sure that people knew that he was still in charge and he was going to put a stop to the attempted coup. But at the same time, the military was sending out messages saying they had successfully taken over the country. But according to most reporting, that never really happened. It didn't seem like the coup was very well supported outside of the small group of people that were taking part. A lot of the political parties inside of Turkey and even people outside of Turkey who have interest in Turkish politics all condemned the coup. Now, some of them could have been doing this to cover themselves up, but it seems like no one really wanted this to happen because it threw a wrench into their own plans. The People's Democratic Party, otherwise known as the HDP, who have a lot of reasons to hate the current president, they came out against it, and the right-wing Nationalist Party and the secularist Republican People's Party. They also opposed the coup publicly. So while they're still sorting out the information and trying to figure out who was behind this, whether it was just a small cadre inside the military, and if they were possibly given orders from outside of that group, the president has publicly fingered this cleric currently living in Pennsylvania, but he denies having any involvement in this. Now, overall, reports are saying 42 people were killed and hundreds were injured, and the coup actually seemed to come to a stop when the president called for all the citizens that support him to flood out into the streets and basically get in the way, surrounding the tanks that were in the streets, cornering the soldiers that were out there, anything they could do to basically stop the march. And it worked. By the time it kind of fizzled out, the president said this: "I am commander-in-chief in this country. Those who attempted a coup will pay the highest price," which may bring to mind something incredibly deadly. It wouldn't be unlike this president to have a very vicious and violent blowback against those who attempted this. So we'll have to wait and see how he regains control of the country and whether he does it in a peaceful manner or he just puts the hammer down. And that result could change his popularity and how the people respond to him. Now, quickly before I go into the last story, coming back to America, there was just reports today of 3 Baton Rouge police officers killed and a couple others injured in a shooting that seemed to be a trap. Police officers were responding to gunfire, and then when they got there, they were ambushed. My feeling on this is, whoever was behind that attack, you may think you have understandable and justifiable reasons for this and defined answers for the question of why the hell would you do this? But you're wrong. You are only doing exactly what the people who don't like you already think of you. You're proving them right. And the more you do this, all it's going to do is spur more violence. And you have to understand, you are not speaking for the majority, whether black, white, anti-cop, for cop. You are speaking for a small, extremist minority that eventually will be overwhelmed by the voices for peace, stability, and understanding. Now, the last story for this week is Trump finally announced who he was going to pick for his vice presidential candidate, and that was Governor Mike Pence of Indiana. Now, there's a couple different things about Mike Pence that many people might not know. One of the first responses I had to this choice was it seems to be somewhat of a safe choice. Mike Pence is staunchly religious, so he brings that kind of evangelical vote that Trump may or may not be holding on to because people don't see him as being a very religious man. But he's also not a wild card choice, like it would be with Chris Christie, who had the Bridgegate scandal, and Christie's kind of a bulldog who says a lot of things that get under people's skin. Newt Gingrich, who comes with a lot of baggage, also says a lot of crazy things. And specifically with Newt Gingrich, I was a little worried about that pairing because both of those people have incredible egos. So how they would work together on a ticket, would they support each other to inflate their own egos, or would they battle it out for really who's in charge? I don't know, that's just my opinion. But either way, he didn't pick him. Now, Governor Mike Pence back in Indiana was barely winning in polls to see if he could keep his governor's seat. So now he's withdrawn from that race because he has to. He's not allowed to run for vice president and for governor, which very likely is going to hand Indiana governorship over to the Democrats. And the person running for that seat is Democrat John Gregg. So here's a quick background on Mike Pence. Now, he's a lifelong conservative and he could help bring over those religious people, but I'm wondering if those far-right religious folks were going to vote for Trump anyway, or would they have just stayed home? Because they probably are not going to vote for Hillary. He ran for the House of Representatives twice and lost before finally winning his seat, and he stayed there for 12 years. And then he was elected governor of Indiana in 2012 and really brought in a flood of far-right religious laws. Here are some of the key votes that he's made over the years. He voted against measures protecting LGBT. He voted against helping families in poverty. He voted for the federal law prohibiting same-sex marriage. He voted against the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He voted against raising the minimum wage. But he's not exactly alone in that. Some economists actually do support that idea, saying that the minimum wage, raising it, doesn't actually raise people's median wealth because everything changes with it. He voted against expanding healthcare for low-income children, voted against additional Section 8 funding. In 2014, he refused to follow the Obama administration rules for reducing prison rape. In 2009, he supported legislation removing citizenship from American-born children of undocumented immigrants. And this final point here actually puts him right in Trump's line of sight, where he voted for a wall on the Mexican border. Now, all of those points are going to get him support from the religious right and outrage from the far left, but that's already what Trump has by himself, so how did that really help him? I don't know. It may have calmed down some of the Republican donors, but the really big people like the Koch brothers are still saying they're not supporting Trump, and that's a huge amount of money not to be flowing into a ticket. Especially going up against the Clinton fundraising machine, which is currently outpacing Trump by huge amounts. Now, in terms of the biggest baggage that Mike Pence brings is something he did last year. He passed a religious conscience law, basically copying a federal statute called the RFRA, or the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And what it did was it gave any business in Indiana the right to discriminate against any customer as long as that reason fell within their religious beliefs. So they could choose not to serve people who were gay, they could choose not to serve people who were black, they could choose not to serve anyone they wanted, as long as it was a strongly held religious belief. When he did that, the floodgates opened and the backlash was huge. Numerous companies wrote to him and to the state as a whole, basically saying they were going to remove projects from the state, remove expansion of companies, remove even huge things like like NBA playoffs, NCAA playoffs, and entirely new companies. All of them were refusing to come to Indiana because of this law. And not even counting money that he might have lost. At the time he did this, he supposedly lost at least $85 million in the state budget because of immediate projects being canceled. Now, because the backlash was so huge, he actually had to quote unquote fix the law and say that he didn't mean this to be discriminatory. It was to protect religious folks. But in reality, the fix was incredibly weak, and most people didn't see it as being fixed at all. Now, because he caved on this, due to all that pressure, people like Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council says he's not going to support Mike Pence as the VP. Now, does that mean he won't support Trump? And does that mean that all of the Family Research Council's influence is going to be pulled away from the Trump ticket? I don't know. But extreme religious conservatives don't like Mike Pence because he backed down. They actually saw that law as a big win for them, and when he backed down against it, it was a huge defeat. And the last point I'm going to make about Mike Pence being announced as the VP ticket, I don't know if this is just a sign of the times or is this a sign of the Trump campaign, but he announced the pick on Twitter. Now, originally he was going to announce in person Friday morning, but because of the attack in Nice, he pulled it. Which makes sense. That's an understandable move. But he could have just waited until Saturday when they finally appeared together. But instead, he sent out a tweet announcing it. Maybe because everybody already knew who the pick was, there was no surprise anymore. But I just feel it kind of loses a little bit of power when you say the second most powerful person in the country, here he is, and I've got 140 characters to tell you. So those are the stories for this week. If you have any opinions on those, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, that would be awesome. You can do so below or at the link at the end of the video. You can also like, favorite, or share this video with anyone else you think might want to take part in a reasonable discussion about politics. Stay tuned for next week, and stay safe, everybody. She's the first woman prime minister she's the first woman to take prime minister. In some ways she would be considered liberal in our politicals, and she also wants to stop foreign-born. Now the democratically lactation? Does the president lactate? That'd be a problem.